Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 253 of the Medieval Podcast. I'm Danièle Cebulski, also known as the 5-Minute Medievalist. We've all been there. You come across a really amazing historical fact on the internet or in school, and you tell it to all your friends, only to find out that it isn't actually true. Then you go through all the feelings of grief, denial, anger, bargaining, sadness, and finally acceptance. If only there was a way you could find out what really is true without having to do all the legwork yourself. Well, never fear, because Fake History Hunter is here. This week, I spoke with Jo Hedwig Teeuwisse, aka the Fake History Hunter, about things that never happened. Jo is the woman behind the super popular Twitter account Fake History Hunter, where she has spent the last 7 years fighting the good fight against misinformation. I know more than one of you has hoped that I'd speak to Jo at some point, so in honor of her new book, Fake History, 101 Things That Never Happened, I invited her to come on and tell us what it's like to hunt fake history, how she does it, and what really grinds her gears. Our conversation on all that and more is coming up right after this. Well, thank you so much, Jo, for joining me. It's so nice to meet you after all these years.
Likewise.
We have been following around each other on Twitter, supporting each other in the fake history hunting. So it's just so great to meet you. Welcome.
Sisters in arms.
That's right.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So you've been doing this for a while. I need to ask, how did you get into this? How did you become the fake history hunter?
Well, I was on Twitter a couple of years ago, and I saw a picture being shared that was claimed to be from the 1920s. And I just thought, something's not right with that. It doesn't fit. And by that time, I'd already been an historical consultant and researcher for 10, 15 years, something like that. And you get this sixth sense. Sometimes you can't say why something is wrong, but you look at it and think, that's not 1920s. It just didn't fit. Mm-hmm. So I researched it. Turned out to be a photo from a 1950s musical about the 1920s. So I was shocked and surprised that someone on social media was wrong. I mean, who would have guessed?
Right.
So I corrected that person who tweeted that, and corrected a few more people. And some of the people were really happy and really grateful. And I thought, wow, I had no idea. So thank you very much for correcting me. I'll change my tweet, or just happy to have been informed. Mm-hmm. Some people didn't care, didn't respond, nothing. And some people got really angry and upset. And I enjoyed pretty much every kind of interaction. I mean, when they got angry, I was so entertained. It was so funny. I thought, why are you angry? Why can't you handle this? Being wrong is not big a deal. And they started defending it. And I'm sure it's the 1920s. And I'm an historical expert on costumes. And I said, well, here's another photo from the same 1950s musical. And they got all flustered. And I thought, this is fun. I mean, if both the good and bad interactions are entertaining, I think I found a new hobby. And it got a bit out of hand.
That's one of the things that I've always noticed about you is I don't really do confrontation. I don't love it, but no one can ruffle your feathers. And social media.
Bring it on.
Yeah, social media can be a terrible place, but you're always keeping your cool. You're just spitting facts. I love it. I really admire that about you.
Yeah, and I realized pretty early on that if you remain polite and friendly and patient, it gets them even angrier. Mm-hmm. Some people have no self-control, and they get all excited and they start swearing and screaming. And if you're sitting there, having your cup of tea, go, well, you're still wrong. They go mad, which again is very funny.
So this became a hobby to the point at which you say in your introduction, you actually go out there and you search for keywords just so that you can correct people and give them the truth. So what does this look like when you're hunting for fake history?
Well, because I'm self-employed, I can do whatever I want. And I live on a little farm in the middle of nowhere. I get up whenever I want and then walk the dog and I have a cup of tea and check my emails. And then I get my very long list of Twitter keywords. It's mostly Twitter. Sometimes I look on Facebook, sometimes on TikTok. But the tsunami of nonsense there is just too much. And especially on TikTok, you can't post links and sources, and you can just say it's wrong, and you get drowned in the comments. So that doesn't really work.
Yeah.
And I just go on Twitter and say, give me every tweet that mentions, for instance, medieval hygiene. And then I go through them really quickly and I think, oh, that's wrong and that's wrong. And generally I post a ready-made comment, just copy paste onto the next. And when I find something that's really interesting or new, an interesting way of being wrong, and generally only when it's posted by someone with a lot of followers, then I share it with my followers, because I do feel a little bit bad about, jumping on someone who's got like 3 followers. And sometimes I just make a little joke. For instance, when someone says, oh, I feel like a medieval peasant because I ate potatoes. And I say, they didn't have potatoes back then. And I keep thinking, this is just a little joke between me and a stranger. But because I have a lot of followers, sometimes like 50, 60 people go, oh, how did you not know that? And I go, oh, sorry, I didn't mean this to happen.
Yeah.
So you gotta be a little bit responsible with who you correct.
Yeah, that's the thing, because it can easily become a full-time job. And so I stopped correcting people all the time and started to choose, like, when am I going to step in? Usually when it's somebody with a lot of followers, or it's getting a lot of traction, or people are starting to believe it, or it's harmful, like really harmful, and it's getting a lot of traction and it has a lot of followers. And that's usually when I step in. But yeah, you can make you're making an entire career out of this.
Yeah, and I sort of did. I mean, luckily I have no social life and nothing better to do, as people sometimes tell me on Twitter. Have you got nothing better to do? No. I mean, I'm done with most of my career. I'm just sitting here on my little farm having cups of tea. I bring on the time. What else am I going to do?
Well, I mean,
so it's fun.
A serious question, I was going to ask is, like, what do you get out of it? Because it does take a lot of energy. It does take a lot of time. What is the reward for you? Is it just entertaining?
Well, yeah, the main thing is that I enjoy doing it. I mean, I'm obsessed with history, and I have been for pretty much for as long as I can remember. And I love nothing more than talking about history. That's the kind of nerd I am. When I still lived in Amsterdam, I would go to an Irish pub and have a bunch of drinks with my friends. And instead of going after handsome men, I would go discuss, 14th century street habits for working class peasants. I mean, that the strangest subjects. And of course, the people I would chat with were also all history addicts. So we'd be sitting there in a corner with our beers going, things weren't like that in Tudor England. And well, what are you so since I moved to the countryside, I don't have that anymore, because pubs are way too far to go, and if you're drunk, you shouldn't be cycling. So if you can do that on the internet, great. I mean, this is mostly started doing it for fun, but because it got so out of hand, and now I also got a book deal out of it, which is a bit of a bonus. So now it has sort of become a job.
Yeah,
it is, but I still do it because I think it's fun and I'm enjoying myself every day. Again, I'm going, well, let's see if someone mentioned potatoes.
Now, we've established that you're a very strong woman. You have very healthy boundaries. But this is a question that I get asked a lot. And that is sort of, where do you draw the line? Where do you stop? Like, you could just keep arguing with the same person forever, because when people dig in, they really dig in. Like, as you say, it becomes really personal that this photo is from the 1920s. Why? But anyway, where do you draw the line and decide, no, I'm out?
Well, I generally draw the line at being able to have a civil, normal, mature discussion with someone, but I keep crossing it. I mean, generally, I should stop when someone starts swearing and shouting and screaming and threatening and all that sort of thing. But sometimes the subject is so interesting. And sometimes you feel that someone is so close to getting it.
Yeah.
It's just one more reply. But yeah, generally when I go, right, you're just too childish, too immature, too stupid, too ignorant, too rude to have a normal conversation with, you're too irrational. Then I just go, right, I'm off, bye. But yeah, you keep moving that line because it really depends on sometimes the subject is just too interesting to let go. And sometimes, because on Twitter you meet people from all over the world, so you get completely different perspectives and people who've had a completely different education. And you're talking to someone who never even heard of the Romans, and you think, what? What do you mean? You never heard of the Romans? Europe, Romans, Celts, Greeks, all of European history, to them, it doesn't exist. It's never been taught to them. Yet they, of course, are posting about it. So they're making claims about European history without knowing anything of it. So and then I'm sort of get distracted because I want to know, why were you not taught that? Where do you live? Where are you from? And quite often I learn something really fascinating about a completely different part of the world where they learn something completely different, which I find interesting. And sometimes the different perspective from people who live far, far away from where I grew up is really valuable and really interesting. And then sometimes I learn something, because that is the best. That's Twitter gold. When you start an argument and you hate each other and you want to visit each other and punch each other physically, you're swearing and you're insulting each other. And then it ends with you going, wow, I'm so glad I learned. That's really interesting. And they're going, yeah, it's really interesting. Nice to meet you. And then you're friends and you've exchanged knowledge. And you go, wow, that was fantastic. That was the holy grail. It's rare, but it happens. And some of the people who follow me on Twitter first learned about me by me correcting them and they getting angry. And now they follow me and they like all my tweets and things like that. So that's...
Yeah, I mean, I find that as well, as long as you're coming at it in a way that's mature, that's not, well, it's not ad hominem, right? You're not like, you are a stupid person for believing this, because I think that we can't be responsible for the things that we were taught, right? We need to go out and learn for ourselves. And sometimes we haven't done that. And so we are mistaken. And so I really think you need to come at it from a friendly perspective at first.
Absolutely, yeah. And a big problem is also that today, because a lot of people realize that their education is flawed, there's a lot that they're not taught about certain subjects. So they use the internet to educate themselves further, which is great. But unfortunately, they end up on TikTok. And they want to learn something about medieval hygiene, and they see a TikTok video that says it was all disgusting, all the cliches. And because they were not taught about sources and references and doing proper research, because that's even more important to learn at school than facts. They just go, oh, look, I found this TikTok, so it must be true. And that's another thing that I'm fascinated with, that, this blindless acceptance to just believe something because, some hipster is dancing and singing it. And I'm going, why do you think this is true? And they just go, look, it's on TikTok. And you go, what? How? And then it's another 4 hours of me trying to figure out how people's brains works.
Yes. Well, I think some of it is that there's a point at which you want to take a shortcut, right? You want to just defer to someone else and say, they know it, so I know it. I don't need to do the research myself. Somebody's already done it. So
we all do it. I mean, there are plenty of historians that I blindly almost believe, because I know how good they are. I know they do their research, and I read their books. But before I share it, I do a little fact check. But I completely understand if someone made a really good documentary that's really convincing and well researched, and some of the people who work on it, I'm not automatically going to think that's all nonsense. I'm not going to fact check everything. I think this is pretty good. So I completely understand that. There are people you trust and believe, and even if you don't know about them, when you first see them, you think this is a trustworthy person, the way in their appearance and the way they conduct themselves. Neil deGrasse Tyson, I mean, he's a very smart man. He knows a lot of things, but when he starts talking history, historians go, oh my God.
I know.
Neil. Stay in your lane. You know what you're talking about, but leave the history to people who know about history.
I know. But bless that man, but honestly.
But I understand that people watch him and they go, well, if he says it must be true.
Yeah.
So I can't blame people for wanting to believe it, but I draw the line at random anonymous TikTokers.
Yeah.
But why?
Yeah, I remember one of the fights I waded into on Twitter was a doctor was sharing this stuff. I can't remember. I think it was about the Black Death. And I was like, no, we can't do this, because her credentials made her seem like an expert. And like, she was just throwing out the type of stuff that racists were going to pick up on and enjoy and love. And so I was like, nope, this is a time where I have to step in. And I did. And she was very angry about that. She didn't block me, but she did dismiss me.
Mentally.
Yeah.
I had the same. And sometimes it's a bit embarrassing, because I've read books by renowned historians, famous historians that I follow, that follow me, and where I found a little error in it. And sometimes I think, well, if someone's ever going to bring up, I'm going to have to correct it. So I'm just going to sit in the corner and hope nobody brings it up because it's going to be too painful.
Yeah.
But, that's the way things go.
We all make mistakes. We will make mistakes in our books, or they'll get out of date or whatever. And you just have to, this has been a tough pill for me to swallow, where it's like, I know that I'm going to make a mistake somewhere, and I just have to keep moving and just do my best at it. But it's hard because you want it to be right, and you know how much this can be repeated. And so I really try to be responsible about it, because it feels like there's a lot at stake. At the same time, there isn't a lot at stake.
No.
You have to take a step back.
Yeah. I also, in my book, I try to explain that history changes all the time. What history itself doesn't, but what we learn about it does, and our perspective changes all the time. So, what I was taught in school is now considered outdated and wrong. So I build in a pretty good excuse for when someone finds a mistake in my book. So no, it wasn't me. We just learned new stuff, I think, sort of. Hopefully.
Yeah. You want to have your colleagues trust you enough that they can be like, okay, you need to fix this thing. And then you do it, and then, it's fine. But it's changing all the time. And it's a tough thing to accept when you're trying really hard to make sure that everybody is on the right page, or at least we're moving forward with it.
For instance, there are many stories in history still that are just being copy pasted, and even by big historians, because it is accepted generally and considered to be truth. It's an anecdote, it's a story that we all know, it's being taught in schools and things like that. And it's when you find one of those stories and you think, is it actually true? And you start researching it, and then you discover that it isn't. That's when you think, okay, I'm going to have to tell a lot of people about this. For instance, the Queen Elizabeth I, this whole thing about her never bathing, but also they attached a quote to her about not bathing very often. And there is no evidence for it whatsoever, but it's everywhere. It's in all the books, well, most of the books about her. And I traced it back to a Victorian joke. And I think nobody knows this.
Well, I was looking at your book, and you do get into the flat earth thing, and it was rewarding because I looked into that, 15 years ago, more than that. And the first place I ever found it was in Washington, Irving. And so I was looking at yours, and I was like, great, the first place you found it was in Washington, Irving as well, because you start to think, am I crazy? Because I'm the only person. I'm not the only person, but sometimes it can feel like that, where you're like, I looked into this, I'm sure it's right, but there are so many people saying the wrong thing that you're like, am I right about this? So it was very gratifying to read that one.
And, everyone knows, if you start researching, you quickly find out that the people were talking about a round earth back in ancient Greece. So
yes,
it's so weird that one of those stories just keeps living. It keeps going on and on and on. And I don't remember the details, but I even found one example of someone in the Middle Ages or the early Renaissance going, that guy is mad because he thinks the earth is flat. Literally someone was being mocked for believing it back then. And I don't think I've said it in my book, but I may have subtly hinted at it, that perhaps today there are more people who think the earth is flat than in the Middle Ages.
Yeah, it's in your book. I think I've said the same thing, because really, and now we have photographs, but of course they're fake as well.
All you need is two pieces of wood with a hole in it and put them apart from each other, and you can see there's a curvature in the earth. Even without a spaceship you can figure it out, but
that seems like a lot of work.
Yeah. Besides, I saw a TikTok that looked convincing, and someone was singing and dancing, so
No, again, I admire you, because you're looking at history from the ancient world to the modern world, and that is a huge scope.
Yeah, but I do have my specializations, though.
Yes.
There are, for instance, until very recently, I knew nothing and didn't really care about 17th and 18th century France. The Revolution and Louis, what's his face, and Marie Antoinette and all that. And then someone made a quote. Someone claimed that she said something about cake, and I had to visit it. And then when trying to correct people about medieval hygiene, they often started talking about 18th century hygiene. For some reason, they brought up Versailles. that they didn't have any toilets and things. So then I had to go and research Versailles. I wasn't really interested in Versailles, but I didn't want to know if they had toilets. So I'm still not that interested in that period, but I do know a suspicious lot about hygiene in that period, just because, you diversify. I didn't want to.
But you just had to. It's calling to you like a siren song.
Yeah. Whenever someone says those people, they were dirty, I have to go, oh, really?
Yeah. Hang on, and you crack your knuckles.
Yeah. Also, whenever someone says this is the first time or the first invention or the first time someone did or made something, I automatically go, oh, are you sure? Really?
Yeah.
And then I start Googling it because I want to know. Because every time someone says this is the first this or that, they are almost always wrong. Just like when they say start a tweet with fun fact.
Yeah.
They are also always wrong.
Yeah. I do remember getting a little bit spicy with Ripley's, believe it or not, because they had something about torture devices. And I was like, believe it or not, actually, this is complete fake. This is Victorian fake. I didn't get a reply to that.
Yeah, they're not responding to my emails either. They have these vampire hunting kits that they're all nonsense. And nope, complete silence.
Gosh. Oh my gosh. So you have in this first book of yours, you have 101 facts, things that didn't actually happen. And a bunch of them are about the medieval world. In your fake history hunting, do you find the medieval world overrepresented?
Yeah, but that might be a bit because of my bias and perspective, because it's one of those eras that I'm obsessed with and have been for as long as I can remember. I think everyone, historians and non-historians alike, everyone has one period of history that I find more interesting than others.
Yeah.
Or you just have a connection with it. And for me, that's the Middle Ages, and specifically daily life of common people. So, this whole hygiene in Middle Ages, but pretty much all the myths related to the Middle Ages are about the common people that are getting pushed down, made fun of. So that's an actual subject that I look for a bit more, that I also like to debate a bit longer than other ones, because sometimes I say, you're wrong, here's the evidence, bye. But sometimes I go, why do you believe this? I need to know.
Yeah, I do see that in your tweets where you're like, why? Please tell me where is this coming from?
If you think about something logically for 5 minutes, you already know that people don't want to live in a street where they have feces up to their elbows. For some reason, medieval people are expected to have loved that.
They were cool
showered in it. I mean, it's. I just don't get it.
What is the response that you get when you ask that question? Like, is there a common response where people are like, I just like to think that people were gross and now we're not?
No. I mean, that is the answer. People want to believe that. We have a certain image of the era, and it's part because of the fairy tales that we were taught when we were children. It's part because of what we were taught in schools. It's a large part, films and television. The image, it fits. And I feel that as well. For instance, I'm still confused by medieval people not having potatoes. I mean, it fits. The potato is such a medieval thing. It's perfect. The way it looks, but
brown and drab.
And boring, and if you don't cook. But anyway, so there are all these images. And sometimes when I read something new, I also go, oh, that's not how I imagined it. For instance, I recently found out that quite a lot of medieval towns and villages had a fresh water supply with actual aqueducts and wooden pipes under the ground, bringing clean water to houses. And I was going, what? That's not the image. Even I, who is pretty positive about daily life in medieval times in general, I was also surprised, because that's a lot more sophisticated and advanced than I thought it was. So we have this image that we like. The same with the Roman era. We also have this image that's generally a lot more positive. We have the same with the Victorian era. We have this image that we don't like being challenged. And we don't like it being challenged because we don't like being wrong. We don't like changing our mind on something. Change is scary. Yeah. And sometimes we also think, I must be right because everybody believes this. And so maybe it's baked into our DNA to automatically reject change.
Yeah, there is a lot of resistance to it. And you do wonder, like, what is your personal stake in this? It doesn't matter. It's over. It's done.
It's I don't get it either. I mean, I found this really wonderful term. It's called chronological snobbery.
I'm going to write that down.
Yeah, it's really good. I got it from an old book. I don't remember by heart, but I can look it up for you later. But there's this, it's this idea that we like to think that progress and change is a straight line upwards. That we are the pinnacle of civilization. That we are the result of thousands of years of progress, which is true. But it's not a straight line. It goes up and down, and some things used to be better and some things used to be worse. And you can say that literally about every era that ever happened. And I had a really good history teacher who said to me, I want you to, for this lesson, find an era and tell me the worst things. And when we did that, he said, right, now tell me the best things. And that was such an eye-opening experience, because you have to look at something and then you have to look at it again from a completely different way.
Mm-hmm.
And I still do that automatically. I think when people are talking negative about a certain era, I try to see if there's anything positive, and the other way around. And I also had that when I was working in the museums and I was talking to members of the public. And if their attitude towards the era that I was representing or talking about was very negative, I would throw all the positive things at them to make them confused, and exactly the other way around. Because you meet those people, who are looking at the Middle Ages through rose-tinted glasses, that it was all princesses and castles and everyone was lovely and happy and gloriously beautiful, and people who are too negative. So you meet them both, and you have to make them both start thinking differently, which I thought was a lot of fun, but also interesting. And the same happened when I was talking in museums about the Second World War. There's people who have this certain image of the Second World War that was either too positive or too negative. It was rarely balanced, which means that you can just make them change their mind and start thinking at things in a very different way. And that was a lot of fun and very exciting to do.
Yeah, it is. And I think you can always see that moment when you're face to face where a seed is planted and somebody has sort of an epiphany and they start to think, and you can tell that they're going to go home, they're going to learn more. It's going to be amazing. And it's really nice. Sometimes you see that on Twitter as well. And one of the things that is inspiring to me is that I'll see a post by you or I'll post something and they're all the quiet people that have just liked it or viewed it. And you're like, these are the people that are going to go and look at this a little bit more instead of just fighting about it. They're the people who are going to be just looking into it and seeing.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it when I'm on Twitter and I get tagged in a tweet and someone tweets, oh yeah, I used to believe that as well, but then this one corrected me. And I'm going, yay, we got one.
Yeah, someone new on our side.
Yeah, it's such fun.
Yes. Okay, so do you find that things are different? I'm starting to notice, or I have noticed since my time, I think I joined Twitter in like 2013, and I'm still technically on it, but not doing a lot of things on it because it definitely is different than it used to be. But I'm starting to notice that you can't get away with the same stuff that you did before, where people will say, medieval people thought the earth was flat, and you're starting to see a response, or I'm starting to see a response that was never there before. So are you starting to see things changing a bit?
Yeah, I probably should keep records, but I'm too lazy for that. But there are subjects on my list that I used to correct 3-4 times a day that are now gone completely. Sadly, new ones have arrived to replace them.
Yeah.
But there are absolutely subjects that either people lose interest in them, or the people who keep repeating it have realized that every time they do, someone annoying comes along and corrects them, so they stop repeating it. And I also noticed that when I try to correct a tweet, I see in the comments that someone beat me to it. So there are certain stories, for instance, the Vikings not having horns on their helmets.
Yeah.
That is now being taught in primary schools to children and in museums and things like that. That message is absolutely spreading. And I wouldn't be surprised if that will one day just die, to be gone completely. And I love that. And for instance, it's happened at least 4 or 5 times that a teacher with 12 followers on Twitter who only posts for parents writes, we had a history lesson today and we were all making Viking helmets and we were all taught that they didn't have horns on their helmets. And I go, yay! So I share it, and then the school goes mad because they've never had that many responses, and everyone's going, well done, teacher. And so that is definitely spreading, and certain myths as well. And you, of course, again, a bit of snobbery perhaps, but sometimes you like to believe that's because of you, which it might actually be arrogance. But yeah, you really start to notice that some subjects are less familiar, less common.
Yeah.
But then, then someone invents AI nonsense and things get worse.
Yeah. I mean, I think that you can take a bunch of credit for this because I noticed that when you started to build your profile, your platform, you took a lot of work off me. You became very popular so that I didn't have to do stuff. I wasn't tagged as much. That was great for me. I started to see a team effort. Eleanor Yanniga, of course.
Yeah. I'll send you a bill.
Sure, you can do that. Are you going to get paid from my podcast revenues? Okay.
Just send me some stroopwafels.
I'll get right on that.
I'm still shocked by how many responses some tweets get or how often they're seen. You post something, and I've worked in television and film and documentaries, and my book is selling really well, but there is nothing that compares to writing a tweet that gets hundreds of thousands of views. There's nothing like it. And of course, then I'm grounded again by posting a picture of my cat or my dog, and it gets more views.
I know.
There you are writing this very long thread with all these illustrations that you've sourced and research that you've done, and you spend hours on writing it, and you get 10,000 views. And then here's my dog with a hat on, and you get 3 million views. You go,
I know.
Thanks for putting me in my place.
You got to keep fighting the good fight, though.
Yeah. My dog deserves it more. So fair enough.
Come for the dog photos, stay for the history.
Yeah. Sneak it in a bit of history when they're not paying attention.
Do you have an example of something that's recent that's just popped up? I know I'm putting you on the spot here, but about the Middle Ages that you're like, wow, this is news. Because I was on Twitter the other day and I saw someone, and it was the most bizarre thing. I'd never heard of this before. They had this woodcut, and I don't know where this woodcut came from. This woman, she's being impaled. And there's this whole story about how during the time of Charlemagne, they would put these women on stakes, and just over the course of days, these stakes would go through the women's bodies because they wouldn't convert to Christianity. And I was like, what? None of this makes any sense. I've never seen it before. And I was like, no, I'm not going to, no. It wasn't worth it, but I was like, this is a completely new one to me.
I think I've seen the picture and I just this sounds like it's about sex, so I'll just go and look at it some other time because I was having my breakfast. But at the moment, it's the torture masks that are big. Torture masks that they are saying there's this one where you're supposed to have these screws that will slowly poke out your eyes.
Oh my gosh.
It makes no sense because, not that I've done a lot of torturing lately, but you just use your thumbs. I mean, why would you make this mask? And I researched that it's just a modern Russian replica of something, of an image they say they found, but they can't somehow find anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And there are these torture masks everywhere. And then some of them are mocking masks, that they wear because you were talking too much, things like that. Some of those are sort of real, perhaps a little bit, somewhere once. But you go to a torture museum and there's 5 in a row, more than we have any sources for. And
so many.
It's like the Iron Maiden, which I was surprised to find that is a relatively recent shocking news to a lot of people still. and the chastity belts, they're not that popular on Twitter. I'm not sure. Maybe people sort of realize that it's already nonsense.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's changed.
Yeah, the Iron Maiden is also lowering on mentions.
Yeah.
There should be stats and graphs for this sort of thing.
I know. Someone needs to do that. Someone listening to this podcast, start collecting the graphs.
Yeah, how often was the Iron Maiden used and mentioned, on Twitter? And then does it go down the line or up? And it's very interesting because Google does that. You have a Google website where you can see how often words are used in books and things like that. And you can see it going up and down, which is fascinating. And we should do that for Twitter. Someone make that.
We should. But yeah, the torture thing, I just end up saying to people, because I get this a lot, when you're speaking to someone at a baby shower or something, they bring up your medieval studies and they start talking
As
about
you do.
torture, as you do. That was the only example I could think of. And I say to people, like, it doesn't take much to hurt a human body. Like, you don't need to be elaborate. Why would you? And then you
It's
get like
easy.
kind of weird looks, but then you move on. But
Yeah,
like,
I've
yeah.
had I'm not sure I'm supposed to talk about this, but I had a talk about torture with people who knew about torture.
Mm-mm.
They knew from experience,
Yeah.
and that was part of their job.
Mm.
And they said to me that torture doesn't work.
Yeah.
And I said, well, kind of depends. And they said, well, actually, we're experts on it and we've advised on it. We know about it. And I'm saying, yeah, well, here's an example where it worked, an historical example. And they panicked because they had just written this big document that was supposed to convince the people of stopping the use of torture. And they came to the conclusion that it doesn't work. But history has examples of it working, which doesn't mean it's a great thing. And of course, it should be banished. But that's the scary thing about torture. 90% of the time, all you have to do is show people the tools.
Yeah.
Look what we could do to you. And
Mm-hmm.
you go, oh, okay, I'll tell you whatever you want.
Yeah.
So it's,
That's funny because I talked to someone who was also, this is like, I don't know what it says about us, but I talked to someone who also knew quite a lot about torture from personal
we
experience.
should stop dating spies.
And he was asking me questions about the Middle Ages, and I said, like, there is a difference between torture and punishment, and I was like laying it out, and all the things that you learn when you go into medieval torture, you start learning about it. And he was like so many people, he was disappointed. He was disappointed that I was giving him a very human answer about this time period because even he had that blind spot where he wanted to imagine like a savagery. Like, I don't think that he was personally invested in like, I really want people to have been savage, but it felt like it was disappointing to give someone a perspective on that. Do you find that too, where people are like, you're taking the fun out of it?
Yeah. And I have to be honest, I sometimes feel a bit sad about it myself.
Yeah.
Because when I was a little girl, we with the school class we went to a local torture museum.
Mm.
It was the 80s, who cares?
Yeah, right.
And the guide who gave us the tour was a proper sadist. He loved what he was talking about.
Oh my gosh.
And he was talking in gruesome details. We had a few teachers with us who went pale and
Mm.
didn't feel well. And all the kids were going, tell us more.
Yeah, exactly.
And later on, I realized that pretty much 90% of what that guy taught us was completely made up.
Yeah.
But everything he taught us was also really cool. It made us all very excited and very fascinated because, that's what kids are like.
Mm-hmm.
And it's I thought, and every time I debunk a story about medieval torture, I think about how excited I was that day when I walked through that museum and hearing all these gruesome stories and thinking, wow, this is weird. I love it. I think, I'm so glad I didn't meet me standing there going, it's all wrong.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I suppose people, they want to believe. I used to love the X-Files, right? And that really still sticks out to me. Like, I want to believe it means
Yeah,
something.
we need a poster that doesn't have the flying saucer, but something medieval.
Yeah,
I want
exactly.
to believe, and then we have this dirty street with people torturing each other,
Or the staircase, the staircase.
Yeah, exactly. Or emptying your chamber pot out the window.
Yeah, right.
I mean, I had a school book that had that illustration in it
Oh,
to
really?
illustrate the Middle Ages, and I remember going, that is weird, but I also loved it. I mean, there was this cartoon of a street full of mud and literally turds in it, and you had a naked child in the mud playing with it. It was I'll email it to you. It's the most beautiful incorrect image of the Middle Ages I've ever seen. And it made an impression on me as a child. I was going, well, the Middle Ages are fascinating in all the wrong ways, but yeah. We really don't like our images changed. I mean, for instance, this whole idea that the past was colorful, not just the Middle Ages, but the Romans and the Greeks, that people like to paint their statues and their castles and their walls and their houses. And even something as small as that upsets people. You say, people, this is what a cathedral probably looked like. And we know that because we found microscopic remains of paint. So there is no argument there. There's no debate. We know that they painted it.
Mm-hmm.
And people still get angry. This is not what a castle should look like.
Yeah.
Because it's what we're used to.
Yeah, they repainted Stirling Castle in its bright yellow. And it looks terrible, like even to me, because I'm like, I want it to look like stone, but this is how it would have looked. And it's good. It's good that we're learning, but at the same time, it is jarring because you have these entrenched ideas.
There's a famous actor, and of course, I can't remember his name right now, but he bought a medieval keep in Ireland somewhere, and he painted it pink because that was the original color. Yeah. And it also it looks so wrong, but I know it's right.
Yes.
So you and I, we have the same problem that that we're bothering everyone with. We too have some images that we just can't comprehend. It's just one day if I buy a castle, I'm going to be so torn if I want to paint it or not, because that's not what a castle should look like, but it's what a castle should look like.
Yeah. But if it's your castle, you do what you want with it.
Yeah, but there will always be this little voice. It's not historically accurate.
Yeah. Okay, I
have two devils on my shoulder.
I know. I get that a lot too. So I have to ask you, is there, if we're going to just stick to the Middle Ages for now, because I know you're leaning into Gladiator 2 coming out. But if we just stick with the Middle Ages, is there one myth that people are still repeating that makes you just irrationally angry?
It's the hygiene. It's the idea that people never bathed, never washed, the streets were muddy, that they emptied the chamber pots into the streets, that they didn't care about smells and things like that. I mean, literally 10 minutes before our chat, I had to debunk a whole TikTok video, just 2-3 minutes of one myth after the other about people being smelly and dirty and not caring, and that they married in June because that's the only time of the year they had a bath. And I'm going... It's the kind of thing that if someone said it in a pub, there might be a fight. And I have literally been in fights over history subjects.
I can picture that.
Yeah, physical fights where people had to pull us apart and go, that was weird. And it's happened more than once. Oh my God. But just thinking back about how irresponsibly violent I used to be as a historian in pubs. But it's that thing. It's the things where it doesn't even make sense. When you think about it logically for just a couple of minutes, you think, well, that's just weird. That's just stupid. That's wrong. But besides that, I, of course, also have tons and tons and tons of research and evidence that I can throw at these people. Mm-hmm. But it's the idea that people just still want to believe something that's so wrong. And it's often done because of chronological snobbery, because they want to feel better about themselves, or because they want to feel better than Europeans for some reason. Because this story...
I hadn't thought of that.
Me neither. It was new to me till I joined Twitter. But every time when there's a celebrity, especially an American celebrity, who says, I only shower 3 times a week, there's a whole bunch of people going, well, that's because his medieval ancestors also never bathed. And you go, what?
Yeah.
What? He's weird. You're weird. The story is weird. What's going on? I had no idea that this thing existed. But there are people who really think there's a connection there.
Wow. Yeah, that's a new one to me. I thought it was just because of movies. We see movies and it's always blue filter and it's always mud. Yeah. Although I think that has changed as well. Have you noticed that too? Like, I think that there's more color in medieval movies. There's less mud. There's still weird haircuts, and it's still hyper violent, lots of TNA. But I do think that the costumes and props are getting better.
I think that too. For instance, a good example is Northman.
Yeah.
I've seen details there that blew my mind, in the clothing, but also in the sets and things like that. And I saw pictures of when it was being filmed, because, I know a lot of people who know a lot of people who were on the set, and they took pictures, and the costumes were amazing, beautiful, colors everywhere. But then, of course, 5 seconds before the film was finished, they did turn the blue filter on. I even had to make a meme of it, saying, this is what it looks like when you fix the colors, and this is what it looked like in the film. And the blue filter drowns out all the beautiful colors. It's so sad. If I had the time, I would re-edit the entire Northman film just by fixing the colors. Maybe I should just do a few scenes, just put them together. It's a TikTok, normal colors, blue filter. Oh, I can do that with a lot of film. I got an idea.
Yeah.
That should be fun.
Now you can send me some of that royalty check.
I'll send you some stroopwafels.
Yes, it's a deal. All right. I enjoyed your book a lot. And even then there were things the medieval stuff I was on top of, but the stuff that was outside of my period, even then I'd heard some of these things. I think it was the kiss in Star Trek that I was like, what? Because I've heard this so many times. So there's something for everyone in this book. And you're actually coming out with a new version of this book too. Can you tell us about the book, the new one?
Yeah, the new one. I've just finished the first version, so it's not quite ready yet. But it's the same sort of book, pretty much exactly the same book, but it's for children. So it's half the stories. Not all of them are interesting to younger readers, and some of them are not that suitable for younger readers, but also didn't want to throw too much at them. But it's the same sort of book for kids, so different perspective, a bit more rude words. All the words I was trying desperately to avoid in the grown-up version, I can finally use, like poo and pee. Yeah, so it's more for children, which in the end made me a little bit sad, because my section about how to recognize fake history and how to hunt fake history, which is also in the book for grown-ups, in the children's book, I realized that it was a bit hopeless, because I had to tell them that AI, that's just beginning, it's going to get worse or better in a worse sort of way. Mm-hmm. And that is going to be so much more difficult for them. So I had to really go, well, kids, it's going to be tricky, but, keep doing research, keep critical thinking. But it's going to be a fun book anyway, I hope.
Good. Well, the grown-up book is super fun, and I hope everyone has a look at it. And I'm looking forward to the kids' book as well, because I think that you need to start this early. And I think if you write a book for kids, the teachers are going to read it too. And I think it's going to make some change.
Yeah. And I also I put in a book which teachers and parents will not thank me for, is that I tell the kids to question everyone. So I'm expecting some emails from angry teachers, because every time they're lesson, one of the pupils is going to go, oh yeah, what's your source?
I hope. Be like, hang on a second, send a giant PDF.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Jo, for coming on and talking to me about your adventures as the fake history hunter. It's been so nice to meet you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, and it was a lot of fun. Thank you.
To find out more about Jo's work, you can follow her on X at Fake History Hunt, or visit her website at fakehistoryhunter.net. Her new book is Fake History: 101 Things That Never Happened. Before we go, here's Peter from medievalist.net to tell us what's on the website. What's going on, Peter?
Hey. Yeah, well, I thought I'd talk a bit about our YouTube channel for a change, right? Because part of medievalist.net, we have podcasts, we have this website, but we also have a YouTube page. It's been going for 15 years. If you go back really far, you can see me and Sandra talking about Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we have quite a lot of content that actually is going up there. And the Medieval Podcast, every episode goes on to the YouTube channel. So it's another way if you want to put it on in the background and watch. There's not much in visuals added to these things, but,
Yeah.
So we have that. Plus, we've been adding material podcasts. For instance, we have This Is But a Scratch from Richard Abels, his Fact and Fiction in the Middle Ages podcast, which is great. And he talks with guests as well. He dives mostly into his kind of niche subjects, which is Beowulf, Anglo-Saxon history, things like that. But he's a fun guy to listen to. Plus, we also have Media Evil, a medieval pop culture podcast. That's with Sarah Ifdecker. So Sarah comes in and talks about movies, TV shows, anything that has a kind of medieval bent to it. And how does it historically line up, and is it good?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Sarah was on my podcast talking about her work on Jewish women, and you've been on her podcast, what is it, 5 times now? A lot.
Yeah, I have. I'm planning for another one. But yeah, I've been on Sarah's. I've been on Richard's a couple times. I love going on, and I love supporting their podcast, putting it on YouTube. And we have Bow and Blade and Byzantium and Friends. And also, if you have a podcast and you don't have a YouTube home, I'd be happy to help you support that. So
yeah. And you're not talking to me, you're talking to the listeners, right?
Yeah, I'm talking to your listeners. I'm sure a few of you run your own podcasts as well, and you want that sweet YouTube views.
Yes, but Peter is putting out the call. If you have a podcast that you're doing that is based on medieval stuff, you can get in touch with Peter at medievalist.net@gmail.com and talk about maybe getting your podcast on YouTube, right?
Indeed. Thank you. Thank you for making that much more clear than I could do.
It's my job. It's my job. All right. What's up next?
So it's a great piece by Laurent Chevalier as he takes a look at this 15th century building in Macon, France. And back then it was used as a brothel. So the facade still exists. And so you can see all these carvings on it, like angels, unicorns, monkeys, dragons, all that kind of wonderful stuff. It's still there. Like you can still walk by and see them very clearly. And so Loris has been able to do a piece explaining, what these actual symbols would have meant in the 15th century. Like people walking by, they would like, oh, that's what it means, right? Because it's a brothel. So I thought it was a really good piece visually as well as written.
Yeah, the secret visual language. People always think about it on cathedrals, right? The visual language of cathedrals. But here we have the visual language of brothels. I love it.
Indeed. So we have all that plus news on a couple of paintings that were bought by the Louvre and a papal palace that was discovered in Rome.
Nice. What? Another papal palace in Rome?
Yeah. You dig up a street and you never know what you can find, right?
Yeah, especially in Rome. Sounds awesome. Well, thank you, Peter, for coming on and telling us all about this stuff, what's going on the website and what's going on YouTube. Thanks, Peter.
Thanks.
Thank you to everyone out there supporting my work through letting the ads play through, recommending my podcasts and books to your friends, or joining medievalist.net's Patreon page. Patrons are my heroes because it's your patronage that allows me to keep this podcast going. So thank you. If you'd like to become a patron, please visit patreon.com/medievalist. And check out medievalist.net's sweet new medieval merch at tpublic.com/stores/medievalistsnet, where you can even get stuff with my super awesome logo on it. And if you do, take a pic and tag me so I can say thanks. For everything from fakes to cakes, follow medievalist.net on Facebook or X at medievalists. You can find me, Danièle Cybulski, across social media at 5MIN Medievalist or 5-Minute Medievalist. And you can find my books at all your favorite bookstores, where you can get hold of Chivalry and Courtesy, Medieval Manners for a Modern World, now out in hardcover, ebook, and audiobook. Our music is Beyond the Warriors by Guy Frog. Thanks for listening, and have yourself a fantastic day.